The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Hello, I'm Carl Seidel, host of The People's View. The People's View is a show sponsored by the Nashua Republican City Committee. The committee meets every second Thursday at the Crown Plaza. And if you want to contact us, we have a website, nashuagop.org. And at the end of the show, you'll see some contact phone numbers or email addresses that you may want to send us your comments and recommendations. Thank you for listening in.
Welcome to The People's View.
Hello and welcome. Today our guest is Kevin Landrigan, late of the Nashua Telegraph and now WBIN Channel 50, right?
That's right.
And how do you like your new job?
I love it, Carl. Thanks so much for having me on The People's View. It's a pleasure. I know you've exceeded 200 episodes here, and it's a pleasure for me to add to the archive. I'm really enjoying my new role. It really was a new career for me. The Nashua Telegraph newspaper is having a difficult time financially, as we've seen. Certainly, I think the Telegraph remains a really important source of news in the community. But I felt multimedia really was the future for our business.
I think you're right.
That not only the television station, but obviously our NH1, our website. We're definitely a digital-first operation. Much of the news you see on your nightly newscasts, you've already seen for hours on NH1. There's no, it used to be with newspapers, you had one deadline, and you'd hold the story until the deadline and then spring it on the public. There's none of that now anymore. We're in an instantaneous business, and we try and reinforce that with the NH1 operation as well. As you know, Binney Media owns 13 radio stations spread across the state, including one in Nashua. I'm doing radio teases every day on all of my stories. I'm on all the radio stations every day, promoting our news for the night and giving people a taste of the news that they're going to see every night. So that's what makes it a lot of fun.
Well, you're up there in Concord. To see you around all over. Every meeting place I go, I see you. So how's that working out? I mean, you're doing what you did as for the newspaper, but you also have now a camera with you where you're taking shots, and you appear on the evening news sometimes.
Yes, I do. It's really been a welcome awakening for me. I kind of had to re-engineer my brain, if you think about it. For 35 years, I've been dealing with words, with different newspapers covering the state houses in New Hampshire and Massachusetts for that long, and working at all different newspapers. And so it was the words that told the story. How it looked and how it sounded really didn't matter. Now the reverse is true. I mean, it's sound, it's video that matters most, and you get very few words on a story. Even if you're doing, as you know, in doing your program here, a 2-minute story on television is a lifetime. It's a really long time. And that really only works out to a 2-minute story, about 400 words. Now, let's put that into perspective. I'll do a 2-minute story maybe once or twice a month, 400 words. Now, for the Nashua Telegraph, I was writing 5,000 words a week. So...
well, I do miss your Sunday.
Well, I miss it too, and we're going to be debuting a political column on our website, NH1.com, a rebirth of my political column that was inside the State House. We called it Perspectives for the Telegraph. I enjoyed my time doing it. It was one of the conditions on coming to NH1. I wanted to create a kind of robust column. And that's what we want to use the website for, is a lot more background, a lot more context to what you're seeing on television, because as I said, you can only You can only provide so much information on the news.
And a lot of little things fit into something like that that you don't make a separate article for.
Correct. And New Hampshire is a treasure trove of that. I'm fortunate to live in such a great state where politics is a contact sport and where everybody has an opinion about it.
That's right.
And no two opinions are exactly the same, which again is what we love to see.
Well, can I turn it around? What's your opinion of the thing that happened with the speaker?
That was, as I said on our nightcast when we were reporting that live, I've never seen anything happen quite that way. To have the speaker obviously have the support of the Republican Party, but not have the support on the floor of the House. For Sean Jasper, who's a longtime member, this isn't somebody who just came out of the woodwork with no experience and no involvement in other leaderships. He's been a Republican leader under other Republican speakers. To put that together with a very small band of loyal followers and all the Democrats was incredibly unusual. And I think will create a lot of tension early on in this session. I do think we haven't seen it yet. We didn't see it in the first business session. I think we will see it. There are, former Speaker Bill O'Brien, I call him the shadow speaker, because after all, right now he has more loyal followers in the Republican caucus than does the Speaker of the House.
That's right.
So that's going to put Sean Jasper in the hot seat for a while. I think, however, Jasper has shown himself over 20 years to be a pretty capable and sometimes cunning politician. The funny thing about Sean Jasper, maybe that conservative Republicans who are new to the legislature don't know, is that if you put 100 issues on the wall and you put Sean Jasper on one side and you put Bill O'Brien on the other side, they'd agree on about 90 to 95 of those issues. Sean Jasper's a tried and true fiscal conservative. He's a tried and true social conservative. He's very pro-gun. He's very anti-abortion. On all of those hot button issues, he and Bill O'Brien are very similar. And what Jasper feels is that every legislative session kind of has its own karma, its own energy. And he feels that as this one gets underway and as we tackle a lot of these issues, a lot of the followers of Bill O'Brien are going to say, hey, you know what? I agree with the Speaker's position on this. I'm going to go with the Speaker. It's not against Bill O'Brien, but we're simpatico. And he's hoping that's going to be the Republican caucus together. He's obviously tried to do that already in a couple of very subtle but important ways. What was one of the first acts he did as soon as he became Speaker? He brought back the right to carry concealed guns on the floor of the House and in the gallery.
Right.
That's something that pro-Second Amendment people feel very strongly about. Then what's one of the first bills he runs out into House committees? The bill to define life at the point of conception, a very important issue for people who support anti-abortion.
Right.
He does it on the same day as the anniversary of the Roe versus Wade decision. That's why he did it, to say to pro-life Republicans who are with Bill O'Brien, I'm with you. You can be with O'Brien, but when I need you on these issues, I need you to know we're going to be in agreement most of the time. I'll hope you vote for me most of the time.
Well, I think when Flanagan held his first caucus there, he came up with the priorities that, as you say, 90% of it would have come up if Bill O'Brien was out there.
Sure, repealing Medicaid expansion, giving local communities a say in the Common Core debate in education. Right to work, which is important for a lot of fiscal conservatives.
Well, do you think that the right to work might be the first one that there may be a little conflict in? Or do you think that because the Democrats generally don't want any right to work law, and what happens then? I mean, I assume that having enough Republicans to vote for it, that it'll get through the House, but will Sean have any problem handling that in his relationship?
That's an interesting question. I think it's been one of the first, you hit on it, Colin, having been in the legislature, you're very savvy about these things. This was really one of the first flashpoints we saw between Sean Jasper and Bill O'Brien.
Right.
Sean Jasper said, I'm right to work, but it's not going anywhere. The governor's going to veto it. It doesn't matter. Bill O'Brien pounced on that, basically said, so we exist in the House of Representatives to do the governor's bidding? Is that our job here?
Yeah,
We should fight hard for right to work.
Right.
You saw how hard Bill O'Brien fought for right to work. I mean, there were 7 different occasions he was going to bring up right to work in the House of Representatives to try and override the governor's veto, former Governor John Lynch. 6 times he didn't bring it up because the membership wasn't right. And he brought it up when it was closest, and he came within 12 votes overriding the governor's veto, which wasn't a pretty impressive showing.
Right.
And I think that was one issue where Bill O'Brien said, we may agree on issues, but is he going to fight for them as hard as I fight for them? That's what Bill O'Brien is saying.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's going to be one of the points. Is there any others that you can think of?
I think certainly repealing Medicaid expansion may well be another one. I know Bill O'Brien feels strongly about that. I have not sensed that Sean Jasper has yet made it as important an issue as I know Bill O'Brien wants to make it. And as you know, this isn't a theoretical debate. I mean, when we created the New Hampshire Health Protection Program, we had it sunset in 3 years. In 2015, something has to be done or it goes away. And right now, over 30,000 people who get health insurance that weren't getting it before won't get it in the future if we don't increase it. Certainly, Governor Maggie Hassan feels that's a very powerful momentum to stop the efforts to repeal this program. We'll see if she's successful.
At the same time, it's driven up the the Health and Human Services Group's budget. They're over budget by, is it $50 million or something right now? And they claim that they're going to be able to get it back in by the end. I don't know how they're going to do that. It's going to be kind of difficult.
It is going to be difficult. And, one of the things that really upset Republican leaders in the House and the Senate was, Health and Human Services Commissioner Nick Tumpus's first idea for closing that $58 million deficit, which was to cut nursing homes.
Right.
Both money that's private nursing homes, and that's also county nursing homes that get paid for the tax.
That's right.
And people who follow local property taxes will well understand that the county expense on their property tax bill has been going up and up in the last decade. And what's been driving it? Medicaid costs at nursing homes.
Right.
Medicaid is now 28% of the state budget. It's one of the top 5 highest percentages of any state in the country now. And it's not going to get any smaller, as you point out, as we have this Medicaid expansion. And what happened with Medicaid expansion was you had what was called the woodwork effect, which was once you created this 100%, in quotes, this 100% reimbursement to expand Medicaid, a whole bunch of people who were eligible but never applied for Medicaid came out of the woodwork.
And some of them had their own insurance before.
They did, and they dropped their private insurance, and their employer was more than happy to say, hey, why don't you go on Medicaid, and we'll drop coverage for you.
Yeah.
And as we see with the Affordable Care Act, a lot of businesses are looking to do that, is looking for ways to get their employees migrated off private insurance onto the Affordable Care Act. And what happens when the federal mandate, the mandate on business to provide health care coverage kicks in as it's supposed to in about a year and a half, you're going to see an acceleration of businesses basically dropping coverage, literally giving their employees a check to go out and get insurance through the Affordable Care Act.
And, some of that budget shifting, too, that we're talking about going on the county budget, it takes away from home care service, which I think, in my opinion, is one of the most worthwhile things to support. You get a lot for your money. Why do you take it off of that? I mean,
home and community-based care is one of the most cost-effective programs in all of state government. When you think about, basically services for folks who are in home and community-based care, in total, cost a little over $5,000 a year. A nursing home can cost $30,000, $40,000, even $50,000 a year. That's certainly what folks, conservatives, fiscal conservatives are really trying to push is more the home and community-based care option.
I think that's much better because, well, I don't know if you know, my first wife passed away from ALS.
Yes.
And so for the last 2 years, we had to use that service. And it just gives you a break, you know, so you're not just there, you know, the person who's doing the health care comes and relieves you of your 24-hour, you know, job, I guess you might say.
And certainly, you know, this is a poll that really matters, meaning you ask 100 families, would you rather have your loved one at home with you during their last years, enjoying their last years of their lives, or would you rather have them in a nursing home bed?
And my wife appreciated it, so she did not want to go in to a nursing home. So, but anyway, this budget's going to be something to work on.
It really is, and of course, I'm appearing here in a very timely fashion. Next Thursday, Governor Maggie Hassan presents her budget address. We're anxious to see how she's going to make it work. This is going to be a very difficult budget, as you point out. There are a lot of holes already in it to begin with. What are the holes I'm talking about? Well, let's start with the Medicaid enhancement tax. You know, in order to settle the lawsuit that was brought by hospitals against the state of New Hampshire, New Hampshire adjusted its tax on hospitals to the tune of a loss of about $50 million a year in revenue. Let's talk about another lawsuit brought by advocates for the disabled. In order to settle that lawsuit, the state of New Hampshire committed that it was going to spend more money basically for community-based care for the developmentally impaired, which I think, again, is very important, allowing people to remain in their homes if they're able to, rather than warehousing them in places. Very important program, very expensive. Again, to the tune of more than $30 million a year once this settlement is fully realized. Like I said, that's $80 million in either less revenue coming in or more spending going out than this present budget had. And we knew this present budget was pretty tight too, as Governor Maggie Hassan is instituting budget cuts right now just to try and balance the budget by June 30th. So we're fascinated to see how she's going to do it. The first and obvious question is there a casino? Remember 2 years ago, Governor Hassan presented her first budget and paid for it with $80 million in a license fee from a casino. That casino never came to pass, and it forced Democrats in her own democratically controlled House to put together a budget without the casino. There's a lot of pressure internally, I'm told, that on Governor Hassan to not drop the casino, but rather drop it from her budget, to advocate for the casino legislation that's now become public. NH1 reported for the first time today on our website the entire totals of the bill. Please watch tonight at 10. We have a full package on that. If I can give a little plug for the news.
Sure.
You know?
Sure.
But there's a lot of pressure basically on her to not put it in the budget. And here's why. That effort 2 years ago, I think in many respects backfired. And here's how it did. She applied a lot of pressure to people in her own party, Democratic legislators, who sometimes, some of them for decades, have voted against casino gambling, tried to get them to support it. Many of them resented the governor for doing that. I think it hurt her in the campaign, meaning Republican Walt Havenstein very effectively said, you presented a budget that was unbalanced. If the people in New Hampshire had the Hassan budget, we'd have been up the creek. And the thing about casino gambling that's really interesting is that polls show that a majority support a casino. But this is a good example of a poll that doesn't tell you much. And here's why. It comes out around 54, 55, yes, 45, 44, no. You talk to that 55% who say they want a casino, no more than 15% of it really care about a casino. Now, you talk to that 45% that's against the casino.
They all against that.
They all care about it.
Yeah.
And even I'm told the Hassan re-election campaign did polling, and they discovered that that the casino actually was a loser for her in that election. And here's why: of those people who said they opposed the casino, 75 to 80% of them said they wouldn't vote for Maggie Hassan. Now, she didn't get the same positive bump from her supporters for a casino. So I think she well understands she's not going to drop her position. She's going to continue to support it. But I don't think she's going to lead with her chin this time like she did 2 years ago.
Well, you know, the thing that got me is that really the way it was set up with the legislation, she wouldn't have got the money anyway.
Right.
I mean, the bill didn't bring that much money in in
Right
this
away.
fiscal. It was 2 years hence.
Well, yeah, and look at the state of Massachusetts. I mean,
Right.
they legalized their casinos almost 3 years ago now,
Right.
and they've already had a referendum that ratified that decision back in November. Still not $1 from the casinos.
Yeah.
Massachusetts, I'm sure, will be receiving some casino revenue, but to your point, you wait a long time to get it.
Well, the other problem I had, too, with that budget is I found out some of the weeds in HB2 were something that I don't think people knew about. $30-some million were taken out of the highway fund above the original legislative percentage that was supposed to be taken out. People probably don't know that the highway fund, which is called road tolls, but comes from the gasoline tax, basically, and some registration money,
Yes.
is supposed to be divvied up so that 27% of it goes to either safety or justice or I forget what the other one is.
Sure, the court system as well.
The court system.
Yep. Yes.
And it went up to almost 31%. So that took away a lot of money from roads, and people wonder where the money is coming. You know, what happened? The 4% 4 cents rather that they added to it is also supposed to be completely for just roads and bridges. And I'm not sure, you know, I got to watch what HB2 says this time. See how they sneak out some of these, divvy up some of these so-called reservations of funds, you know,
Yeah, sure.
regulated funds.
Yeah, in the highway fund, they actually call it the diversion. And Ken Weiler, Kingston Republican, former chairman of the House Finance Committee, really has been the leader in both underlining that, shining the light on it, and also actually passed a law some years ago to try and reduce that percentage. One of the things House Bill 2 was it didn't repeal that law, but it said notwithstanding that law, it actually gave them a permission not to do that. I mean, that's one of the cool things about New Hampshire in terms of transparency, that people can't fully appreciate how good you have it with our New Hampshire state government. And by that, I mean, every bill gets a hearing. Every bill has to be voted on by the body. And in the budget, every change in state law has to be put in a separate bill and has to be voted on that bill. No other state does that. In other words, every time in every other state, when you vote for the budget, you vote for the whole Christmas tree and all the ornaments that are attached to it. And many times, lawmakers don't, because I worked in Massachusetts and found this. Many times, many lawmakers don't even know what ornaments are on that tree until it's already been raised and signed.
6 months into the budget, you might find out what happened to it.
Right.
I know I serve on the Public Works Committee, and we finally got a memo from the legislative group of actually how much in this year was taken out of the highway fund. And that's when we found out, hey, it's almost 31%.
One of the interesting things too about, you know, we've had our first gas tax increase since 1991. Roads and bridges should get repaired. One of the, I don't know, little known fact, but certainly less known fact about that tax increase is almost 50% of the money goes to the widening Interstate 93. So the rest of the state doesn't get any of that 50%. So, and going forward, the highway fund is looking at a $50 million operating deficit. Basically, now former Transportation Commissioner Chris Clement has said, you know, if something isn't done, meaning that if more revenue isn't found, or if those diversions aren't reduced to other agencies, Department of Transportation may have to lay off as much as a third of its workforce. That's over 600 people.
And they've already laid off over almost 150 people over the last 4 or 5 years. So it has reduced it, and it showed, well, I think there's 8 maintenance areas in the state. They closed 7 of them.
Right. And I think people, and certainly longtime observers to the state tell me we've seen that in the winter storms, that the plowing, the interstates, even the plowing of the major roads aren't what they usually have been. They're slower, they're late in responding, they don't do as much pre-salt treatment as they used to do, and as a result, we're seeing the results.
Yeah, well, we're going to find out. As you know, we have a 10-year plan.
Yes.
And we used to say it had 5 years of money for 10 years of planning. I don't even know if we're going to make that much.
I think you're right.
So there's a lot of problems that'll hopefully, well, maybe you'll be talking about them as we go through and sift and winnow the bills as
Sure,
they come
absolutely.
up.
I mean, you're right. There's the 10-year plan, and then there's the unfunded part of the 10-year plan that runs. In other words, these are projects that cities and towns say are essential, and they run literally in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And we've done stories in the past, and we'll do them at NH1 in the future about projects that local officials and residents are clamoring for that aren't going to make the cut.
And, they give a good percentage of that fund back to the cities and towns to do their own.
Correct.
And
12% of everything that comes out of the gas tax, for example, goes to cities and towns.
Right. And I know Nashua is looking for a lot because they have a lot of work to do on these roads. They get beat up quite a bit, especially during all these snowstorms.
The last couple of winters have really done a number on them.
They have.
If it's not the heavy snow, it's the really bitter cold, and sometimes the extreme thawing that we've had. That creates these sinkhole frost heaves that you see on a lot of major streets in cities like Nashua.
Well, what do you see coming up in the next couple of weeks that's going to be the hot button for the people to watch for? Yeah,
well, I think certainly I've been surprised at the level of debate on social issues. Usually, the first year of a 2-year session is dominated by the budget, and I don't think that's going to be any different here. I think the state budget is going to be what we're all going to be watching. But there's a lot of interesting debate and a lot of interesting issues on social issues. We see it in the state Senate next week. They're going to be debating repealing the permit to carry a concealed weapon, a very popular issue among Second Amendment gun advocates, a very unpopular issue among law enforcement. And Governor Maggie Hassan hasn't weighed in there, but certainly now the Republicans are in control of the legislature. That's basically going to be the interesting dynamic. And by that I mean, what's the first job of former House Speaker Terry Norelli? Her first job was to watch the governor's back, is to prevent bills that she doesn't want to have to deal with from getting to her desk. That's gone now, that voters have put Republicans in charge of the House. Now, she can use her veto pen, and I don't doubt she will use it. I mean, that's what people forget, is that when we had a supermajority of Republicans after the 2010 midterm election, former Governor John Lynch, in those 2 years, vetoed 15 bills, more bills than any governor in state history has vetoed. Now, I'm not sure Governor Maggie Hassan is going to equal that mark, but she may be challenged to. And particularly, the challenge may be even greater as kind of politics enters the scene. Those politics, maybe some of our viewers are already knowing what I'm referring to, is the possibility of Governor Maggie Hassan running against Senator Kelly Ayotte for the U.S. Senate in 2016, which would be, frankly, one of the 2 or 3 marquee Senate races in the country. The 2 most powerful, up-and-coming women, Kelly Ayotte, a rising star in the Republican Party nationally. Maggie Hassan, the only Democratic woman re-elected governor, the vice chairman of the Democratic governors nationally, someone who Democrats down there, again, see as a shooting star. If the 2 of them were to go against one another, well, it's a dream matchup for political junkies like me. And as Governor Hassan continues to entertain the idea, much of the legislation that comes at her, she's got to look through that prism too, as well as running the state and what's good for the state of New Hampshire. Right. Well, how can Kelly Ayotte use this, or how can I use this against Kelly Ayotte? I'm sure the Republicans are looking at it that way. So what if she's going to veto it? Right. That's a negative check mark for her.
And,
exactly. And casino gambling is one such issue, is that, as former Attorney General Kelly Ayotte, big opponent of casino gambling, Governor Maggie Hassan, a big supporter. Trust me, that'll be a touchstone in a Senate race if that comes to pass.
Kevin, we've run out of time, believe it or not. And I'd like to have you back in maybe 6 weeks when the Senate bills start to come over to the House and the House bills go to the Senate. We can talk about what that time is going to look like and how there'll be some controversy with the bills that have been approved by one area or the other.
Well, always a pleasure to be on The People's View. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carl.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.